Hello everybody. So, by the moment you're watching this video, Jupiter will have just entered Cancer. Jupiter's ingress into Cancer is a big energetic shift, but of course it comes along with all the other big shifts that we are going through the last weeks and months and this year in general, and that is that all of the outer planets are changing signs. Jupiter is technically not one of the outer planets. He's together with Saturn, sometimes termed one of the social planets, because Jupiter's orbit is quite fast. 12 years means roughly 1 year in each sign. Jupiter's entry into Cancer is significant though, because first of all, Cancer is the exaltation sign of Jupiter, and we're going to go into that in a moment. But it also means that Jupiter is leaving Gemini, and there's maybe overstimulation of the mind and the nervous system and communication and insights, and wow, all the intensity of the quickening of speed that we encountered there in the last couple of weeks and months, but all in all the last year, is really about to shift to a much more watery, emotional, sensitive, felt, embodied experience of the Jupiter archetype, a bit out of the mental and the mind, which is a nice thing. But we can't forget that both Saturn and Neptune in Aries, and soon to be also in early July, in pretty much exactly 1 month, Uranus moving into Gemini, do correspond that on a greater or deeper archetypal collective level, there is a lot of that quickening. Fire and air, Aries and Gemini, are very, very light and very, very much pulling up towards the sky, towards spirit, but also can make us a bit heady. Having Jupiter in Cancer will be one of the nice blessings and antidotes of that time. Jupiter is, of course, a greater benefic, and thus he is said to bestow blessings. But sometimes we can have a really hard time with Jupiter, which most people will not directly understand or see, because first things that you really tend to hear with Jupiter is like, oh, blessings, abundance, expansion, luck, joy, optimism, you'll get more money, and like you win this, or this thing just comes to you. And even though that can be an experience of Jupiter, there is a gap that Jupiter's opening or expansion, if we want to call it that, very often brings into the field, where a deeper resonance of the Jupiter archetypal teaching is necessary for us on the evolutionary journey of our consciousness to embrace. And that is mostly and most strongly, on the one hand, trusting our own self and our own inner intuition. And with that, on an even deeper level, learning to trust and surrender and have faith into life and creation itself. This is especially Jupiter's domain of both the Sagittarius but also the Pisces archetype. And these two are also correspond to why Jupiter is said to be exalted in Cancer. Jupiter's exaltation in Cancer and it leaving Gemini, where it's technically considered to be in fall, also should mark a very distinct shift in energetics for you right now. Right, I just said it, all the quickening of the Gemini, of the mind, of information, of speech, of communication, of input, of social media, of the network, of all the mental cross connections of where and how we gather data, can lead to, with the expansion of Jupiter, to a nervous system overload or overstimulation. Wanting and needing to detach to that inner voice within was maybe also a bit hard in the last rough 12 months with Jupiter in Gemini, because Gemini is so curious. And so a huge curiosity and openness to learn, to see another perspective, is by its own function something that is more yang in nature instead of yin, right? Everything is playing out in that polarity and duality. Neither is better, neither is lower or higher. But Gemini is an air sign, it's said to be yang, instead of Cancer, water sign, which is yin. And the yang signs, which I just mentioned also with Saturn and Neptune in Aries, and soon to be the first glimpse of Uranus in Gemini, are all yang signs that are more extroverted and go out into physical reality, the physical experience that we have here. Whereas the earth and the water signs are more yin, and they pull us more into our own inner subjective world and experience. So with that, anyhow, you might notice a marked shift from, which maybe over the last 12 months you already realized anyhow, that we can look and seek and learn and listen to as much as we want, but as long as we don't have the inner clarity of what kind of voice do we follow, what kind of vision and aim do we want to have, all the information can just clock our system and be pointless in the end. And this is where some of the cliche archetypal expressions or mean social media memes in regards to the Gemini archetype can come from, right? A certain shallowness, a jack of all trades, knowing everything a little bit but nothing in depth. This is, of course, the vision of Jupiter in Sagittarius, where it is more about the greater picture um, and the greater vision, where all the information and data gathering that we learn and then learn to verbalize and vocalize and understand with each other, hopefully, right? What does my word understand mean? What does your word understand mean? Do they even mean the same thing? We all assume that we do, but that's a different conversation. But this is so much this Gemini Sagittarius polarity. We need that higher, deeper vision, a greater spiritual or inner philosophical, moralistic guide or code or seeking, so that all the input that we gather can make sense. But here's the point, right? The signs don't just work very strongly and teach us so much about their dualities by their polarities, the sister sign, the opposite sign, but also by how they follow each other. So again, Gemini is technically Jupiter's fall, because Jupiter is about intuition, the greater picture. But Gemini is about the curiosity of wanting to know everything and learn everything everywhere without necessarily a specific goal in mind, or even just the experience of learning things and understanding things mentally can give one an inner sense of safety and security. I first need to gather all the data, all the facts, and then I'll feel safe, right? Contrast that with people with strong Sagittarius energy that are usually like just going out there, or Pisces, trusting the flow, oh, it'll work out. This natural optimistic tendency is not one that per se comes so much from the Mercury side of Gemini and Virgo, which was once you analyze first and gather the data, find the facts. Anyhow, coming from this heady time, we're shifting to water. We're shifting to the great mother cosmos ocean of Cancer, the tidal waters of the moon, where creation forms itself through this tidal pattern, the up and down sine wave of creation, the pulsating of the moon, the pulsating of our consciousness, is this Cancer archetype. Mythically, it's very often said to be the gate of life per se, right? As if the world itself is being birthed through the Cancer energy or Cancer archetype. And also often that humanity itself is being birthed through Cancer, through the sign of the Great Mother, emerging from the cosmos out onto land, emerging from the realm of spirit into physical form. But Cancer is this in-between space. It's neither fully there nor fully there. Think about Cancer crabs that live by the sea. They need the sea, they need to live by the sea, but most of them, very many of them, don't live fully underwater in the midst of the ocean, but they also don't live fully on the dry land, right? And this is also this tidal, fluctuating liminal space that is never fully full and never fully empty, but always changing, but has a deep feminine resonance and a deep feminine trust in that embodied experience of, oh, the wave goes up, the wave goes down. Jupiter is exalted here, and we can see so much of that playing out because of the cycle of light, at least in the northern hemisphere. Jupiter's two rulership signs of Sagittarius, just before winter solstice, the last sign before winter solstice, and then Pisces, the sign before the equinox, both correspond to the journey of the light itself, the growing awareness of what light is and how it gives us meaning and how it gives purpose to reality, how it gives purpose to our own life, right? We're seeking and yearning and going to far off lands and far distant horizons with Sagittarius to find outer light, but also to find inner light, to find the greater vision of what life is all about, where one can become the perpetual traveler. The road is a goal, right? It's not about ever arriving somewhere, but constantly being on the quest. Another point where Sagittarius and Jupiter can get lost. Whereas then the Pisces side occurs before the spring equinox, when the light is truly winning again, right? Winter solstice in December, is the lowest point of the light, and there we have Jupiter before that sign, ruling Sagittarius. It's about embracing and embarking on the quest. With Pisces, it's a recognition of the duality, the two fishes also, of light and shadow, and how there is an equal and opposite balance. But how after the March equinox, the light is growing in strength and intensity, bringing us to the exaltation of Jupiter in Cancer, right? Exaltation basically means it can operate here in a way that feels easier to our human personalities. There's no judgment. If you've got Jupiter in Gemini and it's fall, it doesn't mean it's any less. I personally have it there. I definitely noticed the overactive curiosity the last year, but it just flows in a way that feels more natural to how that archetype usually wants to express itself. So Jupiter in Cancer is so much about finding deeper meaning and resonance in the rootedness of our human emotional connections, in family, community, land, but also on the shadow side, the Saturn and Neptune looming conjunction in Aries, which is already about self-identity and fighting, and then and feeling defensive about maybe not being able to do whatever one likes to. And then couple that with the home turf emotional attachment and emotional stories that we bring to mother and motherland and the emotional identification there. And you can very clearly see, of course, where and how that plays out. No matter if that's internally in the US right now with ICE agents doing whatever. The mosquitoes are already landing on the camera here. If that is in Congo, Sudan, where it's also so much about identity, Aries, and belonging to a specific part of the land or not. Whether that's with the two warring brothers that we find in Ukraine and Russia, and about the emotional identification and with land and wanting to have a certain type of land. And most pointedly, and worst of all, of course, what we see playing out in Palestine. Shifting again, though, from the world stage to the more personal and the blessing bestowing side of Jupiter, I just said that sometimes it can be this void that Jupiter first releases us into. So what's really interesting is that Jupiter is, of course, Zeus. Zeus in Greek, Jupiter, the Roman name. And he's a great, great benefic god. He sits on the throne at the Olympus, for now at least. And he's also, in that way, the protector and guardian of all of creation and humanity itself. He's highly procreative, which we will see a lot of that side coming with Cancer over the next year. Usually, this 12-year cycle, when Jupiter is in Cancer, it's the time on planet Earth when the most children are being born, like statistically. You can look that up. There's again home, family, belonging, nourishment, and nourishing forms and birthing forms in creation, and the blessing and the energy and the light that Jupiter bestows, the lightning strike that comes from him also. Astronomically, though, as an actual object in space, he's the great gas giant, right? And this is where the overinflation and an overexpansion of something can happen. Too much of a good thing is not a good thing anymore. One solid can be great and delicious and healthy. Try to eat 10 and you won't feel so good anymore. Same with everything in moderation, which is something that Jupiter can sometimes struggle with. Jupiter in Gemini might strengthen also this attachment, and that's more of the I don't want to call it shadow side, but the side of the Cancer archetype, the two claws that clutch onto reality, that really want to go into this involutionary journey into creation, and then find this strong emotional identity and attachment, and the reluctance to letting go, something every person with any kind of Cancer planet can struggle deeply with. It's very hard, it's very tricky for Cancer energy. Think about the crab on the beach again. Once it grabs hold of something, it'll rather let go of the claw most of the time than of the object or prey or whatever it might be that it's trying to hold on to. Right? A certain possessiveness that can come, which for us human plays out most of all emotionally. Again, the water energy of Cancer. This overexpansion and overinflation of Jupiter astronomically also does protect us, because there is a huge asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. And if Jupiter wouldn't be, and the gravitational force and presence of Jupiter wouldn't be, the asteroid belt would hit us and the other inner planets, Mars, Mercury, and Venus, constantly. It would bombard us. Life would not be possible on planet Earth. But because there is Jupiter, the great gas giant, the big sky daddy, we are fine here. He is sitting on the throne, and there's a protective energy to that. The highly procreative energy of Jupiter, also of course manifesting in all of the mythologies, all the ways that he's trying to like seed creation, seed life with all kinds of lovers and mortals and women and mythical creatures. But there again, we can of course interpret that from a very modern, our day gender ideology, masculine, feminine, patriarchal, abused perspective, which is valid, which I don't want to disown completely, because there was slowly that growing awareness or that growing shift to this kind of dynamic in ancient Greece. That was around the time when what we call the patriarchy really slowly took over and surpassed or replaced the ancient mother cults. But we can also look at it from a deeper perspective of Jupiter representing the force of spirit itself, the light of spirit itself, and it wants to procreate, it wants to manifest forms, it wants to birth forms and have all kinds of partners, so to speak, all kinds of Shaktis, if you want to use Indian terminology, to bring life, to bring form, to bring spirit in more and more and more forms, in greater and greater abundance and fullness and diversity. Coming back though to the overexpansion of Jupiter for a moment, and I'll get back to the procreative energy in a second. I'm just gonna, you see, I'm drawing loops here, just like Cancer energy likes to do. The difficult side that we can sometimes experience with Jupiter and the Jupiter archetype is that we can expect and wait for blessings and greater light coming, and everything is going to be fine. I'm just going to have faith and trust, and will be well. I don't need to do anything, which can be a bypassing, a spiritual bypassing that we experience through the Pisces energy, which can be also when we try to bypass physical reality in any way whatsoever, which maybe Jupiter in Cancer now will make us even more aware of the sensitivity and vulnerability of our human connections, of our families, of our roots, of our communities, of what it means to belong, the yearning and seeking and longing for belonging, really feeling safe and contained, just like the two Cancer claws contain a space in between. You need to contain a certain safe space for the baby to grow in the womb, but also the baby in the arm, but also a child in a home. It needs to be contained so it can be kept safe. The hard walls, the hard shell that Cancer can put up so that the soft, inner, vulnerable side is protected. When the overexpansion of Jupiter, or the expansion, if we want to call it that, the greater openness to life of Jupiter wants to come into our lives, what we very often, first of all, experience, though, is just like the symbology of the gas giant itself, that a lot of space is created. And that space can often feel at first very, very empty, devoid of meaning, devoid of old beliefs or belief systems or structures or unconscious belief patterns that so far guided us well, that so far made sense and gave us meaning, that so far lifted us up, gave a sense of purpose to our life direction. Thinking about the glyph of Jupiter, right, this curved arc, and then the cross above it. The curved arc represents spirit itself, and the cross always represents matter. So Jupiter is that side where spirit lifts matter up, right? But the space that is being created is one we need to empty ourselves before something new can come in. If you wanna have new sparkling water in this jug which has been standing on the side of your table for a day or a week, you maybe first want to pour out the old stale stuff that's in there. And this is exactly what can happen so often with Jupiter, that there is actually blessing, abundance, openness wanting to come into our lives, but very often first that means something old has to go. It's not happening usually in a way though that feels very Saturnian, like hard, long work of deconstructing with a hammer and chisel the old structures, or it also doesn't feel very Plutonian, as in there's the underworld journey and just like these powers grab something from you and there's a mercilessness and an intensity to Pluto, which usually also doesn't come with Jupiter. Jupiter is just sometimes slowly, sometimes very quickly creates empty space. And this is where the deeper functions, the deeper teachings that we want to embrace with Jupiter again need to come in. And those are, where and how can we have faith and trust? Where and how can we sit in the space in between, not bypassing it, still learning to listen with a more and more and more attuned eye and ear and inner vision to this whisper of our intuition, to this whisper of the signs and synchronicities that maybe want to guide us to where and how the Godfather, if you want to, is trying to guide us in our path. But not necessarily knowing where the path will lead yet, not being able to see the great new picture, the big new grand vista of Jupiter that usually wants to grant to us. So having faith and trust and learning to then trust our intuition. And when our intuition asks us to trust also to then make leaps of faith, where our human mind might rebel and find a million arguments, that the Mercury side find a million rational, logical arguments against jumping. But Jupiter tells you, like, oh, but as long as you don't jump from this cliff, you will never experience the feeling of being caught, never the feeling of feeling carried by the winds. So making leaps of faith is this very strong Jupiter teaching. Jupiter now in Cancer, its exaltation sign, shows us where and how the spirit want to create new life through us, whether that's physical new life in form of an actual human body and baby, or all the million other ways of where and how we can seed new life in an emotionally attuned way, in a femininely attuned way to our inner cyclical nature, to the cyclical nature of our own life, of our own fate, of where and how we find a sense of home and belonging, and trusting these waters, trusting these flows, even and especially when they ebb and rise again. Trusting that we can develop over this next year a deeper emotional attunement to the philosophical or spiritual or inner moralistic perceptions and visions that we have on the world, and let them nourish something in our life as well, which won't feel as mental as the last year, won't feel as quick maybe as last year. And they're also again pulling in the image of Cancer, reminding ourselves that Cancer walks sideways, crabs walk sideways. They're not Aries. It's not about straight ahead and attacking the target on goal. It's the soft, slow, careful approach from the side. But then also look at Cancer crabs by the beach and how quickly they can disappear again. How fast the movement can be when it wants to be. Right? Once a goal is hot, and then like grabbing it. Paying attention though to, of course, where and how we get overly emotionally invested and attached, and in that way lose track of the deeper or higher purpose and meaning of whatever is unfolding in our lives, and how it wants to reconnect us, emotionally reconnect us to spirit, make us feel emotionally like we are a child of God, a child of divinity, a child of the great mother goddess, how we all belong, how we all family here, but instead get too emotionally invested, attached, and identified with whatever form is unfolding right now, whatever little beautiful vision the Mother Goddess is weaving in front of our eyes, which is also part of that Cancer moon quality, right? The emotional visions that we can have, which we can get so invested in and so overly identified in that we lose spirit, that we lose our identity and spirit and try to become fully identified with matter. Jupiter in Cancer is all about bridging both, but not getting lost in either, not spiritually bypassing and not trying not to be incarnated, not being fully embodied and fully here and fully now, but also not getting so lost in the emotional identification and the emotional forms, whether that's a partnership, a family, a project, a home, a mother country, um, whatever it might be. And probably they will all feel like whatever it might be. And that could very well be also in work. That could be in a solo project, but where we can get very defensive. Cancer can be so defensive and so protective. So paying attention there is this other big lesson that Jupiter in Cancer will bring over the next year. Lastly, though, I really want to highlight how beautiful and potent and wonderful this blessing of Jupiter in Cancer is and will be over the next year, especially considering that all the other energies are quite intense and tend to bring us more up and heady, and Aries into action, Gemini into the mind, Uranus, right? The slow shift over this and next year out of water and earth, Saturn and Neptune and Pisces, water, and Uranus and Taurus and earth, and to Aries and Gemini, the fire and the air, the lightness of spirit, but also the quickening of mind and action that can get disembodied from the emotional identity and from the emotional body and from the vulnerable part, where we can get so hardened, so protective, or close ourselves off to new experiences to such a degree that no true expansion of spirit, of meaning, of purpose, of beliefs, of inner spiritual, mental, emotional quests or expansion can even unfold, because we can become so defensive and so afraid of change or of letting go, not just of any outer form, but also any inner form, any inner identity. And that's the last point, right? Cancer does rule children. That's outer children, that's everybody that's vulnerable in the outer world, especially if they pertain to any kind of degree of family. That can be little children, can be old people. Um, Within our blood family, but also, of course, in the world in general. But it's also our own inner child, and where we can get lost and the over-identification with the inner child and the emotional inner stories, the whirlpool pulling us down, and we don't even want to get out because it's so nice in there, right? I could just keep on dreaming a bit and keep on longing and yearning a bit and keep on flowing, but being afraid to actually show or act or move ahead, right? So the inner child dynamics, they do deserve so much healing over the coming year. Oh my God, humanity really needs to embrace this lesson. Look at the world. So much of what is happening in the world would not be if there wouldn't just be a lot of men and women, no matter if they're really powerful or just a normal citizen like you and me, um, wouldn't be so wounded from their own inner child, wouldn't be so emotionally disconnected. So I have a lot of hope and faith and prayers that this level of reality, this level collectively, will hopefully receive a great boon and a great opening of spirit bringing healing there. But also where and how we personally can get over-identified, again, too attached, too protective, too defensive, all of these Cancer energies with the inner wounded child within us, and the sensitivity and the vulnerability and and the childhood stories about it, right? Oh, because my mom dropped me, I'm now this, and I'm justified in doing this to the world, or doing this to myself, right? It's not coming from an empowered place, but it's coming from a place of an over-identification of a wounded inner child story that just wants to be reperpetuated unconsciously by identifying with it, instead of taking accountability for that and bringing the Sky Daddy, bringing the greater awareness, Sky Daddy, bringing the greater Jupiterian awareness to these parts of ourselves and seeing like how the emotional patterns, how the emotional weaving within us is part of the greater unfolding within us, so that we can go and emerge out onto land from the waters, out of the inner child, out of these identifications with victimization within us, and take greater charge, have a greater vision, have a greater lightness, see more potential, see more possibilities in the world and for our own life, that become free from the past. Right? Cancer rules the past and memories and mother, and how we can use them to not bypass them, to honor them, but at the same time integrate them, and seeing that everything that happened has brought me to this place, and that opens me up now to a possibility of seeing things also from a greater perspective instead of getting identified with that. So really alchemizing our memories, alchemizing our past to propel us into greater futures instead of becoming defensive about it or trying to sidestep it or trying to not feel it. So much will depend on feeling, so much will depend on emotions over the next year. I'm a natal Cancer. Let's see how that'll be for me. But yeah, that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening. I'm getting completely eaten up by the mosquitoes here at twilight. And I hope you'll have a beautiful Jupiter and Cancer time. It's just before the full moon, of course. Wednesday is Sagittarius full moon ruled by this Jupiter, which is a very good beneficial energy connected to that all. I'm going to do another video on that tomorrow or on Wednesday. And thank you for listening. See you soon. Bye bye.